You're listening or watching to Marvel's book, and in this episode, I'm gonna talk about test driven development. What is test driven development? Well, test driven development is one of the ways a developer could think about programming and the programming logic while working. There are also aspects to thinking about it, other aspects of thinking about programming code, like object oriented modeling of the software layers, or how to handle the below layers of the software or the library, or how to plug in the specific dependency into your code and the platform, and making code easier to change, the update, adapt to new changes, to the ever-changing specification requirements, or making the source code easier to separate and delegate and to give it small pieces of the work to different developers. And there are probably more and more ways of thinking about source code, but one of the as- aspects a developer could think about programming while programming is how to develop it, the functionality, and test it, even while programming and even before the logic is implemented. So, test driven development guidelines is to wrap up how the functionality should work even before you have written the logic. First, the programmer should implement and verify the so-called happy path. Does the code works when all the input parameters are correct? And are the output parameters right? So then after that there are endless variations of wrong or invalid inputs that, if placed in the tests, will verify until the end of the existence of a software that does the software behave correctly on every type of input with correct input parameters or with incorrect input parameters, and even after the code changes. So, for what areas is best suited the test-driven development? Tests are tests are good thing to have whenever in whatever type of product, but there are certain types of projects that are better suited to have tests. Some of them are implementations of technical standards, so that are negotiated between multiple big organizations that are used by millions of people. So probably these types of standards and applications are a little bit less often, that these types of applications are changed less often and after another long negotiations. Other places are the software that is following the laws, the guidelines, the normative requirements of some country. So these are places where, when the process of changing such requirements, the laws, is it's not like changing a single line of code. There are normative paths to verify before any change that will affect the source code will come. So, in another area is financial institutions. Having tested repeatedly, the frequently and deeply, the software that handles money is very important, especially as money touches the pockets of everybody. So it should be very solid, very stable, and bug-free. Another area is life-endangering areas like medicine software, like devices that measure health conditions should be very, very good and should behave correctly in all situations. Another life-endangering situations are in engineering, like out of places like automotive industry, aviation, bridges, and road building, simulations of such systems, calculations of that will affect the physical world. One bad math operation in such areas could cause a lot of direct deaths and indirect life-endangering incidents and problems, especially for airplanes. There were in the past accidents of bad sensors of airline soft in the airline hardware and software, and these types of places are mix of software and hardware and should be very solid because they could cause deaths. So there are also cases where having tests is going to extend the development time and will not make developers, testers, managers, and the whole team happy. These cases could be startups that do not know what types of software they should do and what types of software they require. So the development approach there should is shortly named agile and is also a chance of creating a total mess of the software development with changes of requirements after each night. So not a good place to embed tests. And the bigger factor if test driven development is a good idea if the changes of requirements are too frequent. This is the basis. In general, it is not a developer problem to figure out requirements and how often they will change, but when changes come, it becomes increasingly a developer challenge to keep up with making clients happy and keeping up functionality wired together and not breaking the old code. So there are several points of view on test-driven development from different roles. Managers. The managers may not be happy about software development taking a little bit longer. They may need to convince clients or investors when things are not actually done fast enough, but they may even take less money, which I don't believe actually, from the work because the greater development time. But all the senior roles will be happy in the long run because of the higher quality of the software. Even after the initial developers leave the company, the changes over time, the newcomers will have a little bit harder time to break things unconsciously because of the written and unwritten guidelines of all the legacy code. The fresh developers will probably continue with the practices embedded written in the code and make it will not make incidents with breaking changes because of the legacy tests. So the clients and the users will be still happy and the bugs will lack, and probably this will bring in the long run paying clients and happy owners of the products. Quality assurance specialist point of view. If there are tests in the code written by developers, it will be harder for testers to find bugs. If the quality assurance specialists are coders themselves, testing scripts, for example, Selenium for web clicking, automation testings, they may be slower at the beginning of the testing of a software, but as their scripting base grows, they will detect bugs faster and they will do less and less work to verify all the old all the old bugs and all the old fixes. Developer point of view. It depends how the coder will feel about test-driven development. It will depend on project type, development lifecycle, experience of the software engineer, and so on. The developer may not be happy of test-driven development because it is actually work that will take more time as number of lines of code. If the requirements change, this means changes in the code of the tests too. So these are changes in more or more and more places. Besides the project type, the software organization environment should developer choose have test-driven development have some other factors. Ego, delusion of competence. When developer adds some projects in the back, when he develops several projects, he starts to become confident about his skills. So the thing is, his own code is not the only variable of the software product quality. There are code library changes, there are operating systems that constantly update, there are external environments, there are IDE improvements, misconfigurations, cached code, programming language changes. So there are a lot of variations where things could break even with a small rock. So the custom code on top of the developer code is just a tip of the iceberg, and having tests could become a solid base for verifying for the developer to verify his own code and not trust his competence. The idea is that the idea of test-driven development is to never trust even your own code. So you let it verify itself instead of rerunning and clicking endlessly like a monkey your own code. And every cases that the cases of a workflow of a code could be endlessly, and if you need to click them manually, you waste your time. So one good aspect of placing the edge cases, for example, in the code is adding them to be verified as well as the happy path each time you encounter an edge case. So this will bring up the quality of software as the number of edge cases increases, the number of edge cases that are embedded even in the testing suite. If the coder is paid per hour basis, probably he will not care about the longer hours that he may be actually, and he may be actually happy to have another task to write tests about software and this will extend the development lifecycle because of getting paid per hour instead of per task. So More time writing code? No. Normally, a developer tests his own code before pushing it to be tested by others like quality assurance specialists and users. When the code includes user interface components, he or she must run on the platform that it will run, like console applications like browsers, native mobile phones, or desktop computers. So the REST client tools often REST client tools are often used for testing backend services, for example. To test an app that is executed in command line, there are console print print lines that developer sees if the values are correct. If the test is coded, if the test code if a test code is placed during development, all stuff could be executed automatically by the building and the packaging program before it is published to staging environment or to production environment. So if the requirements jump out, it will require changes in the test cases, but it will still bring up the quality. So from developer point of view, this could be viewed as waste of time, but from ideological point of view, it is bringing quality and stability to the software. So a developer, if the decision is coming from the developer, if he must include test-driven stuff, he may choose based on from his experience how often the code will change, to decide if he must embed tests. So this is it. See you or talk to you next time.